Welcome. I'm Pamela Rickia from livingjoyfully.ca, and today I'm here with Sue Patterson. Hi, Sue.
Again.
Yay. Sue is a longtime unschooling mom, founder of Unschooling Mom to Mom, and a coach. She has been on the podcast a number of times, as have two of her kids, and I am so happy that she's back. A few weeks ago, I invited listeners to submit questions for us to chat about. So are you ready to get started, Sue?
I am ready.
Okay, our first question. I love unschooling and I believe in the process. We are in our 8th year of unschooling in a state that requires a report of learning in certain subjects at the end of each school year. Having to track my kids' learning for the school system is the one thing that I dread about unschooling. Will you talk about ways to keep track of our kids' learning without it affecting their learning? Sometimes I am tempted to throw some school learning their way just so I can include it in the report. I would love more advice on trusting the process.
All right. Well, the first, with the question about how can I do this without it affecting their learning? That's easy enough. You just record it and don't necessarily tell them what you're recording. You're just observing, you're having interactions with them, and you're gathering the data from that. And then you translate that into the schooly talk. Yes. that you're whatever that is it your state or your whoever is needing the report. So one of the ways that I recommend to people, and it depends, because first let's think about, sometimes people say, oh, I have to record all these subjects, but in fact they only have to record 4. They don't really have to record it quite the way their mind immediately goes to. And so get real clear on what you really have to do. And sometimes, if you live in Pennsylvania or New York, you've got a lot. But if you live in other places, you may not have to turn it in to anybody. You may just record it because someday somebody might. And remember that at any point you can say, oops, sorry, didn't do that thoroughly enough. I'll do better next time. You can always do that. You're in charge of your life. And so don't, if you feel like I'm so afraid that the government is going to come, and that is such a rare scenario. But if you do have to turn something in, maybe you have your state has an evaluator, or you have to give information to a state that's a little bit more restrictive, make sure you're giving them only what they're asking for. Sometimes we as parents are submitting more information than necessary because we want a good grade, because we want the approval. Well, let me tell you, they are never going to give you approval. I don't care how much you submit. And if anything, what I have seen happen is when people submit a lot, it allows them to kind of, oh, well, if you're going to do that, why didn't you do that? And so it might be better to just cover it in a more general way. And so sometimes what I've had people ask people to do is to look at the Department of Education website for your state, and then you can, all right, look up 3rd grade, look up the language that they use, and just use their language, because then they're seeing what they want to see. Check, 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 silent, sustained reading, got it. Which just means they read a few things, and so try to not put too much on yourself and on that recording. Be real clear about, and so it's really important to talk with probably other unschoolers from your area, because sometimes the homeschooling crowd tends to be a little overzealous in their recording, because they are still kind of feeling like, this is going to be my grade. I want to show how great they are. I want to show how much they've learned. I want to show how I've provided all these things. Okay, do that in a scrapbook or something that's a little bit easier. Doing it for the governing body, keep that separate. Do whatever they need. Check, check, check. Done. Now, how do we share? Oh, look, last year you went to this year you did. That's a whole different area, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah. No, I love that point, to be very clear on what you have to do. And there are very good reasons to not over explain
overshare,
or over supply, overshare.
right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Right.
What bubbled up for me was really trying to make it like as part of not having it bubble into our lives and like maybe affect their learning and their choices, because I'm subtly trying to get them to make more schooly looking
Right.
choices,
Right.
is to make the recording pieces as easy as possible. So, if you're a writing kind of person, maybe you just set up a little app on your phone or have a notebook with you where you can just write super bullet points on what they actually did. Like, don't get caught up doing the translation into school language in the moment,
Oh,
because that
right.
brings that school filter with you all the time.
Right.
Just record what they're doing. Or if you're more of a visual person, just take a few pictures, right? That will tweak you that, oh, they did this and they did this. Those are the nice reminders. And then when it comes time, then on your own, sink into that translation piece. It becomes easier. Like when you get in that mindset of what you're looking for and you know exactly what you need to report on. So if it's only those 4 subjects or whatever, you're just going to be scanning through your bullet point writing or your pictures looking for those 4 things.
Right.
And
Right.
it's much easier to get in that mindset and then leave it so that you don't bring it with you every day. If you've got
That
it
is a
in
great
your mind
point.
every day, you know,
Right.
that's when it's
Yeah,
much
do it
more.
at the end of the year when you got to turn in your end of the year evaluation, or you've got to write your thing for the future, whatever. But that's the only time. I think too that that's such a great point. And I think that you'll be shocked when you start recording little things here and there, how much you have to work with,
Yeah.
And so for a lot of families, what we've done, and you can do this for yourself, is that we have a Google document. You just create one that has columns, that has the 4 subjects you need or whatever number the requirements are. And then you can have it like in a notebook where you just jot it down. We went to the Science Museum and you put it under science, and you also put it under language arts because they read the stuff, or you put it under history because they talked about how long ago animals did this, and then or maybe it's also geography because the earth changed and the plants did this, and you could write it in all of those columns, and then it will be easy for you to work with at the end of the year when you're like, we did a little botany, we did a little, you just get to call it that because that's the wording that they're looking for. And I love the idea of not doing that educational, looking at the DOE all year long. Don't do that, because that is.
Yeah, that brings that to your lens every day. And that's when you can start feeling like you should start putting more schoolish looking things in there,
Right.
because you're always looking for it. But
Right.
truly, yeah, try it a couple of times, but I'm sure you will find that just noting what you're actually doing, you will be able to, at that point where you need to write the report, translate that into what.
And remember too, that a year into it, you're going to personally do a lot of learning. So if you're brand new at this and you think, oh my gosh, all right, know that 6 months from now, you're not going to feel so, oh my goshy. you're gonna be like, oh yeah, that's a little of that and a little of that and a little of that. And a lot of people use Evernote as an app. Yep. That you could have like a folder for your subjects that you need. And that is an easy way to like, oh, look, he's playing Minecraft. Take a picture of him playing Minecraft, put it in technology, put it in reading, put it in math, put it in critical thinking, put it in wherever you need to put it, so that when you come back to look at your folder, you're like, woo, look at all that stuff. And you have plenty to work with.
Yeah. And I was thinking too, if you're having a bit of a hard time, you see what your kids are doing or pictures of what they're doing, and you're having a hard time putting that into schoolish kind of language, just like you were saying, ask your community, right?
Yeah.
You've gone to them to find out what the requirements are. you can brainstorm. Okay, I'm having a hard time, writing down what they're learning from this. Oh, you'll get so many great responses
And
from.
we can put it in the show notes because I don't know it off the top of my head, but there's a Facebook group that's something like what my unschooler is learning when ...
Yeah, I've seen that go by too. Yeah.
So if you are not like, I don't know, they're outside and they're making a bike ramp and then you write that in there and you just write, I don't know, they're building a bike ramp. And then you'll get like 20 answers of the physics and the this and the that. And you're like, thanks.
Yeah. And you know what? Even if you don't have to record things, I think that's an important deschooling step. That helps
Absolutely.
you start to see all the learning that happens in all these activities. Okay. Our next question.
Okay.
If I am not yet comfortable, in fact, I'm extremely anxious about giving my kids 7 and 11 the freedom to play video games as long as they want, what can I do? I do give them longer chunks of time, but after 2 to 4 hours, I have them come off, at least for a while. I see my kids give up things they truly love to do, like draw, play outside, Legos, imaginary play, etc., because the vast options of games online absorbs them. What do I do if I can't go radical?
You don't have to go radical.
And can I just say, I'm not so much about the label radical. It's not about trying to approach a label. It's like, just focus on what you're doing, and what is working for your family. Okay.
And I think a lot of people think I'm not doing it right, or I'm not doing it good enough, or I'm not unschooly enough, or remember what this really is about is doing the most individualized approach that you could possibly do. So it's not going to look like mine or Pam's, because the individuals involved in your family have different interests, have different scenarios, you have different baggage to unpack, all of that kind of stuff, right?
And is something really important to consider up front is this causing friction in your relationship with your kids? Like, if this is working reasonably well for everybody, it doesn't need to be an urgent thing to be solved. It's not about pursuing the label, right? It's about the kids and the family. It's about our needs, their needs, and peeling back those layers. So definitely from the language, there's more to peel back here. But, if everything's working for everybody right now, you don't need to rock every boat to say you're right. You know what I mean?
There's no unschooling police coming to your door to say that you're not doing it well enough. We're stripping your badge from you. It's not happening. But I do want to just say, because then we'll get more about her question actually. Yeah. But the word radical kind of freaks people out, some people, and then other people are like, I want it. And remember, all it really means is that you are taking the unschooling principles that we have about learning and that we're hardwired to learn and that it's all around our life, and incorporating that knowledge into how we deal with parenting topics. And so then all of a sudden, unschooling isn't just an educational approach anymore, it's a lifestyle. Yeah. And so it's kind of permeating everything, where we say yes more often and we partner with them to kind of figure out how we're going to navigate this life together. And that's what this means. So a lot of people say, well, I'm not going to be a radical unschooler. Fine, don't call yourself that. But see what parts of your parenting could use a little of that partnership concept in unschooling, because you'll find that when you can learn to trust them and they can trust you back, you can move in the direction that is going to be less friction, like you're talking about. Mm. And so whether you love radical or don't love radical, set that aside for a minute and then think about the topics and the concepts. And so one of the things that popped out to me on this question is the 11-year-old, because so often parents feel like they don't do what they used to do. Well, because they're not 7 anymore, they're 11. And so when you get into this preteen age, it is not unusual to start being kind of bored with the old way, kind of not that interested in those old hobbies that used to be so fun in the living room. And now they're like, yeah. So I think that recognized from a growth and developmental standpoint, kids move on and they don't always hang on to the hobby that just warmed our heart because that's not their goal. And, so I think that when they change their interests, go with it. And the other part that I want to say is that after 2 to 4 hours, you make them get off of there. I get that. We have had we've been inundated in society with anti-technology and a bazillion articles written along those lines. They are not written with the perspective of learning how to manage your choices. If you always have someone else managing your choices, you never learn how to do it for yourself.
They're not your choices.
They're not your choices. And so I think is it Alfie Kahn or somebody that says, the way kids learn to make decisions is by letting them make decisions.
Yep.
And, and that means mistakes, that means missteps. And there's goodness in that, because what that's about is seeing, oh gosh, the sky didn't fall. Oh gosh, I can step forward into something and pivot because some piece of it didn't work. Or I don't have to be so overwhelmed like we were when we were school kids, so overwhelmed with the humiliation of the failure or the judgment or the shame that we can look at it and say, this part worked, this part didn't, this part did, this part didn't. And then we can patch it together and figure out what our next step's going to be. Whereas if you had all that anxiety from your school experience of messing up, then your window gets smaller and you can't problem solve. So,
yep. And especially when you're anxious and fearful about things, it feels like an all or nothing,
right
or wrong, but there is just so much richness between those two opposites. And we can kind of get caught that we have to choose one or the other.
And we've been conditioned to think like that it's all black or white. It's all right or wrong. And, it's almost never right or wrong. It's always got a little of both.
Now, what I thought I would talk a bit about when I was anxious about, so right here, she's talking about their choice for video games, but really for anything that kind of stretched my comfort zones and made me feel anxious. What helped me a lot was to dive into it more with we tend to step back when we're anxious about something because we don't want to be confronted by it all the time. But it was so helpful for me to actually get more involved with my child and to see what it was that they were getting out of it, what they were loving about it. It helped me deeply understand them and what it means to them. And in fact, I did this with video games with my eldest, and I'll put a link in the show notes. These are going to be full show notes.
Right. We have talked a couple times before, and you have done what is this, 276 episodes?
Yeah. So I have an article I wrote it was for Life Learning magazine many years ago. It's called Everything I Need to Know I Learned Through Video Games, which was what
Unschooling Mom to Mom website. I think I linked to that one.
I bet you did. It is what I learned when I actually just, this isn't, 3 months, 6 months. This isn't a big chunk of time in our lives. I can dive into this with them and see what it's about for them. So that's the article is about a lot of the stuff that I learned. So for me, the path forward when these kinds of situations arise involves learning about how unschooling works. And so understanding why people are making these choices. What is the value? Why are people saying yes more? What do we get out of it? How does that help not only their learning, but also our relationship? And also understanding our child's perspective, which is what I was talking about. And when we weave those things together and start to see how they connect. So when we're closer with our child, we see more unschooling in action. We start to understand how it works better. And eventually, like for me, every single time is how it ended up. I got to the place where that was a choice I wanted to make. It wasn't because I should be a radical unschooler or I should let them do this. It was, I understood unschooling and my child more deeply and understood why I actually would want to make that choice.
And you didn't let fear make your choices for you.
Yeah, but you need to work through the fear. It's not about ignoring it.
Say, all right, Pam says don't, so I'm not. And then you're like,
I'm not anxious.
Biting your fingernails.
Yeah, that doesn't work.
Yeah, one of the things I was thinking where you're after 2 to 4 hours, they come off, at least for a while. If that's a natural thing for them to come off, then that works better. If you're like setting a timer and saying 2 to 4 hours, that just makes them cling to it more.
Yes.
You know, and so you have to be careful of that you can have this, you have held onto it tightly and you're letting it go. And so they just cling to it because number one, they're not sure if you're going to change your mind and it's going to go back to the old way because they've seen you do that before. And because we all have, I'm not being judgy. We've all done that. And because we're like, okay, try, not that much. And then to remember that that's part of human nature that if somebody is limiting us, if somebody were to come to me and say, stop reading that book now, you've been doing it for 2 hours. And you're like, pfft. And so the same reaction happens when you say to your kids, and even when you kind of sugarcoat it and you're like, wow, it sure is nice outside. I wish we weren't stuck in here with technology all the time. Oh, you think you're so subtle. And but what they hear is mom doesn't like what I like. Mom's judging me. Mom doesn't get it. Mom, all these things that keep the relationship further and further and further apart. And so when you can value the things that they value, when you can stand at the halfway mark and say, I get it, they're a lot more likely to come closer to you because you extended that to them instead of saying, no, I'm over here. And in order to be good, you must come to my way. And so that is problematic because in our nature, we want to do our thing. We want to be independent. We want to move in the direction of our strengths and our interests and our curiosities. And somebody that says, yeah, but not now. That is, you're like, get away. That's not. And so no wonder the kids react like that. And so what I have found, because I have a 6-year-old grandson, and he just loves my phone. You know, he has got a bazillion apps on there. And, but I noticed that like at a certain point, he starts to get a little antsy. I'm like, you want to go outside and swing? Yeah, because he knows he can come back to it anytime. When he knows that the flow and the rhythm is determined really by him, then it's a lot easier to say, oh, I'll try your thing. I'll try your suggestions. So your suggestions can't be, let's do this worksheet on fractions because surprise, surprise, they're not going to like that. But if you said, oh man, the dog needs a bath. Help me. And they're like, yeah. And, or maybe they're like, and you're like, I just can't do it. I only have 2 hands and I need another set of hands. But when you have been the person that listened to their needs and their wants, they're going to be a lot more likely to listen to your needs and wants because you've modeled that kind of a way to interact. And some of us, I was reading the Bonnie Harris book, When Your Kids Push Your Buttons. It's kind of a weird title for an unschooler, but because for me, it's like, well, then disengage the buttons. And she talks a lot about we bring all this, how we were raised, all these stories to our parenting. And nobody helps us walk through that. And really, some of us have had some troubling childhoods. Some of us have had some parents that have been critical, and those can be things that are hard for us to overcome. I can't let my mom see how much my kid is on the computer, or she'll think I'm a bad mom. So you got to unpack your baggage. You just have, if you want to get to a place where you're not directed by your fear and past stuff, you do your own personal work, and you do like what Pam's saying, is dive towards it so that you can see, oh, wow, look at all that critical thinking. Oh, wow, he had to do, some math stuff, or he had to do some, and you see that it's not a monolith. They might be researching, and they might be doing some various academic concepts, and they might be chatting with friends and developing their vocabulary and making a story arc. So many things.
Yes, that's exactly it. And that's what I discovered. That's what that article is all about. That's why it's everything I need to know, because there's just so many pieces in there. Right. I love that you brought up stories, and the stories that we may bring with us, because actually last week's episode was like all about stories.
Oh, really?
The stories we tell ourselves. So that's going to be really cool. If you haven't listened to that one, I would recommend.
It'll be in the show notes.
Take a peek at that. I also wanted just to mention, like you were talking about, how those limitations can get in the way, because they're going to cling tighter to things that they feel like they have less of a choice on. If they have an opportunity, they're going to cling tighter to that. And I'll put a link to Pam Sarushian's, I think it's Economics of TV Watching in Children, but it's about the diminishing marginal utility of things. And it just makes a lot of sense at helping people understand when you're doing time-based things. And just one thing that came up to me is when you're looking at time, so maybe you have like this 2-hour limit, and then you want to go, you're taking your kids out to play for a while, and then maybe they come back to it or not. But just one baby step that you can do that is more considerate and thoughtful for your kids is, okay, noticing when your 2-hour thing is. But when you're going to them, not saying your 2 hours are up, but noticing where they are and what they're playing. Let them finish the boss battle, let them finish the level, and making it less about the clock. And like you said, your grandson, you notice he's getting antsy. He might be open to moving around and doing something else. So making it less about the time or the clock, and making it more about the actual people involved and the situation. Right? Mm-hmm. I think that can be super helpful.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're only on question 3.
This one's a little bit longer, but I'm going to share it because all the different aspects.
You do. Yeah.
I find that as I move ever so slowly, haltingly, inconsistently towards less control and more freedom, I am confronted by much fear. Some things which are valid fears and others less valid. As I allow my son and 7-year-old daughter more freedom and access to online material, my son comes to music and videos that are sexually explicit, gang, drug-related, etc. My kids often listen with headphones, so I don't know all that's being said or sung. He toggles back and forth between video games and YouTubers, and many things expose him to more mature and inappropriate content. He wants to stay up watching YouTube videos all night if I'd let him, which unfortunately I cannot do. I'm just not there. That puts me over the edge, anxious. We do talk about some of the things he sees and hears. I guess my confession is about my deep fears and confusion on my own toggling between safety and care for kids and creating a less controlling relationship. I find as I try to let go of control, my fears are triggered and I react with anger because I am afraid. What a confusing and disturbing cycle. Definitely not the positive, supportive environment my children can grow and flourish in. Yes, I do have a counselor I process my journey with, but that's minuscule compared to the everyday moments with my kids. How do I balance or navigate my own decontrolling journey, which is thick, rooted, fearful, at times anxious, and reactionarily controlling, with my kids' journey of freedom, play, and exploration? My husband and I both struggle with control issues, so letting go of it is highly triggering. I've done a lot of work in the last 3-4 years, but the deep-seated control issues and reasons are not easily uprooted. It's not as easy as just let go more. Sometimes I wonder if I'm doing more harm than good as I let go of control, only to get afraid and angry and pull back control. How confusing for everyone. I do talk with my kids about my struggles and understand the confusion it can cause. It sure feels like a very bumpy process, 2 steps forward and 3 steps back. I just wanted to pop in with one thing. Like the very first thing that bubbled up for me in that first sentence was, rather than thinking about this as moving from control to freedom, try thinking about it as moving from control to connection with our kids. Because freedom, like if that's the kind of word that we're using even in our self-talk to ourselves, it feels like we're not involved. We're freeing them. We're letting them off on their own. But that's far from the truth of what we're talking about. So instead of controlling our kids, we're connecting with them. Because moving away from control absolutely doesn't mean caring less about them, right? It's not that we don't care about your safety or anything like that. I think it's more about the journey from control to connection for me is more about the work of recognizing how capable our kids are, right? They can be our partner, right back to when we were talking about partners earlier, right? And I do have a podcast episode 240 that Anna and I specifically talk about how kids are capable, and that could be really helpful to listen to. Okay, I have some more to say, but I'll throw it to you, Sue.
Okay. And I am glad that you have a counselor to help you walk through having an angry reaction, because that's probably how you were raised. And so we tend to fall back on the familiar, right? And so don't beat yourself up. It's a process. It takes a long time to undo some of those really deep-rooted things, ways that we interact with our kids and expectations we have for ourselves and expectations we have for our kids. So all of that, give yourself some grace. And then the other part is like Pam's saying about leaning towards connection, that it's okay to say, so some of these scenarios, and here's the problem. If you have been saying, I hate that stuff you watch, that's so disturbing, that's not how people's bodies really look, it's not, all the things that are typical drive-by comments that we make when we are feeling, number one, that this isn't going the direction we want it to go, and number two, they are, she didn't mention how old her son is.
No.
But I think that if he's, depends, but kids are curious. Kids want to know, what does that mean? Why do they say that? It's a perfect opportunity for you to watch some of that stuff with him and to be able to say, wow, that was so unkind. I don't know what would you do if somebody said that to you? Or how would you feel if somebody said that to your sister? Or how would you, you just start to have real live conversations with them instead of thinking, I must position myself as the authority, show my disapproval so they will learn not to do it. It don't work like that. If anything, what that does is they will learn not to tell you. Mm-hmm. And that is not what you want. What you want is for them to share it with you so that you can bring some real life in, so that you can say, wow, yeah, I think that people go to jail when they do that. Without being judgy, without being, oh, you always hate my guy, you always hate my this, you always hate my that. Okay, if they're saying those words to you, then you got to zip it. You've got to say, show me what part you like, show me, and not like prove it to me, but more of a, you are such a smart kid and you are so curious and the world is so weird and we live in a pandemic and you are figuring stuff out. I think that that's so great. So show me what part, show me, educate me, and that way they will, number one, like we said on the other question, be glad you're interested in what they're interested in. The other thing is to know that you might see gang violence. You might see, I can remember when my kids were little and I wouldn't let Michael have a gun. Everybody gave their kids guns. And I'm like, no, we're not doing guns. We lived on a base. You could some kids were shot because they pulled a gun, a plastic toy gun in the shadows. It looked like a real gun. It's only gotten worse since then. And so I was like, no, no, no guns. He would chew his toast into the shape of a gun. He was curious about it. And then of course, when because we started as school kids, he went to kindergarten, and his 5-year-old birthday were all other little kindergartners. Every single one of them gave him a Nerf gun, a water gun, a this gun, or that gun. I'm like, I'm putting up the white flag. I give up. And I will say, he's now 32, has no interest in guns, has never shot a person, has never, all the things that you think, oh gosh, this is condoning it. That's a story that you've got to kind of work through, because they know you're not crazy about it. You've probably shared that multiple times, but there's something about it that they're intrigued by. So without letting it, a couple times she said in here, she gets triggered by different things. Figure out how you're going to breathe through the trigger, because when you can do that, then you can connect with him, and he won't have to hide it from you, because that is not the direction you want to go as you enter adolescence,
And as you're connecting, when you're leaving that open space, it goes back to the kids are capable. You may leave that space for them to share, how he get arrested, in real life doing that or whatever.
Right.
You get to learn how they're seeing the things. There are some things that may happen that are like go right over their head. Like we don't know ages, and it isn't even age dependent. It's child dependent. It's
right.
Right. So, they may not be seeing at all or noticing at all the things that are freaking us out. Or they may be seeing these things and, it's just fun and interesting for them. Maybe it's a fun thing for them to pick out all those things that, I would never do that, or I would never do that. But you won't know that until you connect and have those kind of open conversations. It isn't about connecting so that you can go, like you're talking about, go and share all the things that are wrong so that you can get them off your chest. It's more about being super curious about what they're seeing, what they're enjoying out of it, what they're picking up, what they're thinking about it. Those are the pieces that are so valuable and that really do help us move through these fears and triggers, because they are so much more capable than we give them credit for so often. And I did want to say that I really appreciated the observation she made about how confusing it can be for kids to like bounce back and forth.
Oh, right.
I thought that was really valuable. And it's so helpful to recognize that pattern, as you said, and explore ways to move past it, like to breathe through triggers, just to find little tools that are helpful for us to move through those, because that confusion can definitely erode trust. And I was really curious about, they are listening, watching most of these videos with headphones on. And to take little baby steps, like we talked about in the last question, maybe a baby step would be asking, or saying, can you take the headphones off? I'd be really curious to hear what you're listening to while I'm doing such and such, because it may be that they're putting them on because they're worried about invoking those fears, right? And because they know those fears they may be told like to turn it off, or they can't do that. Mm-hmm. So it's super interesting to work through that stuff, because listening or watching, like you were saying, diving in more with them when we're anxious and fearful, it truly helps to, instead of step away, to dive in and see what's really happening, because our fearful imaginings so often are so much worse. Like,
oh my gosh, we go straight to the catastrophe, right?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, they're going to join a gang now because they watched gang violence. Why would they? Sometimes they're interested in that kind of stuff because their real life is so not that. And so they're like, people live like that. Interesting. You can watch West Side Story, just to go. And it doesn't mean you're going to join the Jets. It just means, all right, story. This is just story to them. And, you watched the Power Rangers or you watched Wile E. Coyote and you didn't suddenly bring a bunch of TNT and blow some, those things. Remind yourself, just because they see it doesn't mean they'll do it. It's just.
And when you're connected, that's when you get to help them process it. Right. That's when you can have those conversations. But as we were saying, especially at first, when they can be wary of what we're going to say or think or do, zip them out, as you said, right? Quiet and just observing for a while, right? Yeah. Giving them the space to have their reactions and for us to see what they're thinking and processing. And then just kind of bouncing back with them, not with judgment, but with curiosity, right?
Because you know yourself that you don't bring something to somebody that's going to be judgy.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so the kids are the same. And you may be thinking, no, but a good mom sets the boundaries and shows them we don't talk about women like that. We don't do this or we don't do that. The good people don't. But if you can't have a conversation without getting preachy, then don't be surprised that they don't bring it to you.
Yeah, that you're not part of that equation for them, right? Yeah, exactly. Okay.
Not that it's not hard. I mean, I don't want to sound like, no biggie, because we do all have our own personal stuff and we're terrified for these little humans that we adore. And I love what you keep going back to, that when we really believe and trust that they're good inside, they'll make the right decisions. They've had modeling of love. They aren't going to start getting, just thinking gang tears down there. It's not going to happen because the life that you're creating is accepting and loving. And all right, we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, and supportive. Like if they know that they can come and talk to you about things without feeling judged and shut down and shamed for what they came across, when they know they can have a conversation, you can help them process it. Right?
And if you've had a traumatic childhood and you can't do that, there are resources. There's like Sex Positive Families. That's a great website that we can put in the show notes. She's come and talked to my group before, and Melissa Carnegie, and it's all about embracing without shame and allowing kids to move through their questions and their curiosities. And some of us have traumatic childhoods and we just can't do it. And then let's get you some resources that can, and try to help you not make it so taboo, that you understand it's just human nature to be curious. We're just figuring our way,
Yeah. I love that. And sometimes there are things, that if we aren't comfortable, if we don't feel, and maybe for now, because nothing's forever, right? This isn't the always never thing again, right?
Right.
You're playing around with the path. Maybe if it's not something we feel we can do right now, maybe we just choose to step back for it, and maybe we ask our partner, maybe we ask a close friend, can you be around watching so that you can kind of you can have conversations with them that aren't charged.
Right.
While I'm processing, there are so many possibilities. We don't have to be it all, and it doesn't need to be all.
Right.